She was only 20 years old when she received a marriage proposal that would change everything. He, a cold-hearted millionaire, wanted only a discreet wife, and one night of total surrender. You won't be able to stop watching when you discover the true price of this love. If you enjoy stories of love and romance, watch until the end and you won't regret it. Subscribe to this channel and leave a comment telling us where you're listening to this beautiful story from. Let's continue. The New York City sky was gray when Isabella awoke. 20 years of life, but her soul carried the weight of someone who had already lived twice as long. She opened the window of her small apartment in the Bronx and contemplated the buildings that rose like concrete giants, so different from the small town of Pleasant Ridge, Ohio, where she had been born. Here in the relentless metropolis, she felt even more invisible. The apartment was simple, a combined bedroom, living room, and kitchen with a tiny bathroom. The peeling walls told stories of other tenants, of other dreams that had perhaps also been lost along the way. But for Isabella, it was a refuge, a place far from the instability of her mother, Marilyn, who had remained in Ohio, drowning in prescription medication and the bitterness of being abandoned by her husband when Isabella was still a baby. That Saturday morning began like so many others, waking up early, preparing the batter for gourmet truffles, shaping the small spheres with the precision of someone who understood that every detail could mean the difference between selling or not. The old refrigerator hummed in the corner of the kitchen, as if complaining about the constant effort to keep the ingredients she used fresh. While she worked, Isabella turned on the small tube television, one of the few heirlooms she had brought with her when she moved. The news showed images of the financial district on Wall Street, where a charity gala to raise funds for cancer hospitals would be held that night. The faces of the Manhattan elite paraded across the screen, white smiles, gleaming jewelry, impeccable suits. A ticket to that event would cost 3 months of my rent, she thought, as she rolled another truffle. Her fingers were rough, with small burns from caramelized sugar. Hands that worked, that fought, that had never known the meaning of ease. Her cell phone rang. It was Mrs. Davis, her neighbor from 302, her first customer and now a sort of surrogate grandmother. "Bella, my dear, I need another box of those pistachio truffles. My granddaughter is visiting today." "Of course, Mrs. Davis, I'm finishing a batch right now. I can bring them over in an hour, is that okay?" "Perfect, dear. Oh, and there's something I want to show you. An ad I saw in the paper. I think you might be interested." Isabella hung up, intrigued. She finished rolling the sweets, set aside a special box for Mrs. Davis, and organized a larger one with various flavors. She had received an order for a small corporate event on Fifth Avenue, but the client had cancelled at the last minute. Now she had a box of sophisticated truffles with no destination. It was then that an absurd idea crossed her mind. What if I tried to sell them at the charity gala? The idea was ridiculous. She would be stopped at the door. People like her didn't frequent those environments. But something inside her, perhaps the audacity of the desperate, perhaps the exhaustion of always playing it safe, pushed her to try. After delivering the truffles to Mrs. Davis and hearing about the ad for an administrative assistant position at a clinic, "It doesn't pay much, but it's on the books, Bella." She returned to her apartment and opened the single closet in her room. There, hanging on a solitary hanger, was the only dress she owned that could vaguely pass for formal, a simple navy blue dress, bought on sale 2 years ago. "This is crazy," she murmured to herself as she ironed the dress. "But what do I have to lose?" The building where the event was held was imposing. A mirrored tower that reflected the city lights, as if capturing all of New York's brilliance for itself. At the entrance, luxury cars dropped off guests in black tie attire. Women in renowned designer gowns, men in suits that cost more than a year of Isabella's rent. Holding her carefully packaged box of truffles, Isabella took a deep breath. The plan was simple and probably doomed to fail. Enter as if she were a contracted vendor for the event, try to sell the sweets among the guests and, with luck, make enough to pay her overdue electricity bill. By some bureaucratic miracle, she managed to get past the first security checkpoint. "Delivery for the event," she said with a conviction she didn't know she possessed. The guard, distracted by the arrival of a celebrity, just waved her through. The ballroom was stunning. Crystal chandeliers hung from the high ceiling, reflecting light like artificial constellations. Tables decorated with extravagant floral arrangements, crystal glasses that tinkled delicately when touched, the elegant murmur of polite conversation, the occasional restrained laugh. It was all like a foreign country to her. Isabella circulated through the room, trying to appear both invisible and as if she belonged. No one seemed to notice the young woman in the simple dress with a box in her hands. She approached a group, offering her truffles with a voice that betrayed her nervousness, looks of confusion then disdain. "The dessert table is in the other ballroom." "Dear," said a lady with a pearl necklace without looking her in the eye. She was about to give up when she noticed a man watching her from across the room, tall with graying hair at the temples that contrasted with the still dominant black, an erect posture, and eyes that seemed to assess everything around him. He wasn't smiling. He showed no emotion other than intense curiosity. Their gazes met for a brief moment, and Isabella felt something strange, like a recognition, like a distant echo. She looked away, embarrassed by her own audacity. When she looked again, the man was walking toward her. The crowd seemed to part for him naturally, as if his body emanated some kind of magnetic authority. He wore an impeccably tailored dark suit, and wore no jewelry other than a discreet but clearly valuable watch. "You're not a guest at this event," he said when he approached. It wasn't a question. Isabella felt the blood drain from her face. I was trying to sell my truffles. I'm a confectioner." The man raised an eyebrow. His eyes, a deep brown, seemed to penetrate beyond the surface, evaluating her as if she were an interesting puzzle. "Showing initiative is admirable," he commented, his voice deep and controlled. "But there are proper channels for that." "I know," she replied, gathering her courage. "But proper channels require connections that people like me don't have." Something in his gaze shifted. Perhaps surprise at her frank response. Perhaps recognition of an uncomfortable truth. "What's your name?" "Isabella. Isabella Mendez." The man stood still for a moment, as if the name had triggered some distant memory. "Victor Salvatore," he introduced himself, extending his hand. When Isabella touched his hand, she felt an electric current run through her skin. It wasn't just the shock between the warmth of her hand and the coolness of his, but something deeper, more unsettling. "Your truffles," he said, gesturing to the box she held.
"May I?"
Isabella opened the box, revealing the small culinary works of art. Pistachio truffles with Sicilian lemon zest, Belgian chocolate with sea salt, caramel with a Brazil nut crunch. Victor chose one, the simplest pure chocolate. He tasted it with the caution of someone accustomed to evaluating everything in life. His eyes closed for a moment. "Extraordinary," he declared, opening his eyes. "How much for the whole box?" Isabella hesitated. The price she normally charged would be laughable to a man like him. $200, she said, doubling her usual price. Without hesitation, Victor pulled a fine leather wallet from his inner jacket pocket. From it he extracted 5 $100 bills. "Keep the change," he said, taking the box, "and here's my card. Contact my office on Monday. I have a proposal for you." Before she could respond, he had already walked away, taking the truffles with him, and leaving Isabella with a sum equivalent to half her rent and a card bearing the logo of Salvatore Investments, one of the largest financial conglomerates in the United States. When she finally managed to read the card carefully, back at home she realized it wasn't just a business card. On the back, handwritten in an elegant firm script, was a note. "Interested in ordering your sweets for corporate events? Be there at 10 a.m. Ask for me at reception." Isabella spent the entire Sunday torn between excitement and fear. A large order could mean the difference between struggling month to month and finally getting some financial breathing room. Maybe even start saving for the psychology degree she so dreamed of. The Salvatore Investments building was an imposing tower in the heart of Wall Street, its all-glass facade reflecting the New York sky like a vigilant giant. Isabella took a deep breath before walking through the automatic doors. The reception area was a vast space with a marble floor and a central desk where 3 receptionists worked with mechanical efficiency. Isabella approached, feeling out of place in her simple dress, the best she had, but clearly inadequate for this environment. "Good morning," she said to one of the receptionists, a blonde woman with an impassive expression. "I have an appointment with Mr. Victor Salvatore." The woman looked her up and down, a quick but thorough assessment. "Your name, please." Isabella Mendez. The receptionist checked something on her computer. Her eyes widened slightly. "One moment," she said, picking up the phone. She spoke in a low voice, casting occasional glances at Isabella. A few minutes later, a man in a suit appeared. "Miss Mendez, please follow me." The private elevator took them directly to the top floor. Isabella could feel her heart pounding against her ribs. The doors opened onto an executive floor decorated with austere elegance, shades of grey, dark wood, contemporary art on the walls. The man led her down a silent corridor to a set of double doors made of solid wood. "You may go in," he indicated. "He's expecting you." Victor Salvatore's office was a vast space with an entire wall of glass offering a panoramic view of New York City. The city stretched as far as the eye could see, a sea of concrete and glass under a sky that threatened rain. On the other side, bookshelves filled the entire length of the wall. An imposing dark wood desk dominated the center of the room, and behind it standing was Victor. "Miss Mendez," he greeted, gesturing to a chair in front of the desk. "Punctual. I appreciate that." Isabella sat down, trying to control the trembling in her hands. "Thank you for the opportunity, Mr. Salvatore." "Victor, please," he corrected, sitting down. His movements were fluid, controlled. "Your truffles made a remarkable impression last night." "I'm glad to hear that," Isabella replied, allowing herself a small smile. "In fact, they were the first sweets I've tasted in years that reminded me." He paused. As if he had reached the edge of a cliff of memories he preferred not to explore. "Well, that doesn't matter now." Victor opened a folder on his desk. "I've done some research on you, Isabella Mendez. 20 years old, born in Pleasant Ridge, Ohio, moved to New York 2 years ago, works as a self-employed confectioner, no formal registration, lives alone in the Bronx, no higher education, mother with a history of emotional instability. Father unknown." Isabella felt a chill. How did he know so much about her in such a short time? "That's unsettling," she said, her voice firmer than she expected, "and probably illegal." A subtle lift of his eyebrow was his only reaction. "When one reaches my position, Isabella, information is just another asset to be acquired." "And why investigate a simple truffle vendor?" Victor leaned slightly forward. "Because nothing about you is simple, Isabella Mendez, especially not that crescent-shaped birthmark you have on your left wrist." Instinctively, Isabella covered her wrist with her right hand. The small mark, which she had always considered just a curiosity, suddenly felt like an exposed secret. "How did you—" "My mother had the same mark," he said, his voice now lower, almost intimate. "A genetic rarity. It occurs in less than 0.01% of the population." A heavy silence settled between them. Isabella felt as if she were on the edge of an abyss, as if every word spoken in that room could alter the course of her life forever. "I'm not here to discuss truffle orders, am I?" "No," Victor confirmed. "I'm here to make a proposal of a completely different nature." He stood up, walked to the window, and contemplated the city for a few moments before turning back to her. "I am 42 years old, Isabella. I've built a financial empire worth billions. I command over 5,000 employees. I make decisions daily that affect the national market. But I live alone in a mansion on the Upper East Side, where the silence is so dense I sometimes think I'll go mad." Isabella remained silent, unable to predict where this conversation was leading. "I was married once," he continued, "to Helen, a talented, sensitive pianist, too fragile for the world I inhabited. His voice faltered for the first time. "She took her own life 5 years ago. The press called it depression. The truth is more complicated." "I'm sorry," Isabella murmured. "Since then I've buried myself in work. But there are social expectations, pressure from the board, questions about emotional stability. A man in my position is judged not only by his results, but by his personal life." He sat down again, facing her directly. "I need a wife." "Isabella." The statement hung in the air like a sentence. "What?" she asked, certain she had misheard. "I am proposing an arrangement," Victor explained, his voice once again controlled, as if discussing a corporate merger. "A marriage, by contract, for a period of 1 year. During this time you will live in my house, accompany me to social events and play the role of a devoted wife. In return," he pushed a folder toward her, "in return you will receive $5 million at the end of the contract. $500,000 will be deposited immediately upon signing as a sign of good faith. In addition, I will pay for any education you wish to pursue during that time." Isabella opened the folder with trembling fingers. The document was extensive, detailed, with legal language she barely understood. But the numbers leaped off the page, amounts that would completely transform her life. "Why me?" she managed to ask, her voice barely a whisper. "You have the same mark as my mother," he replied, as if that explained everything. "And there is something in your eyes, a strength that doesn't bend easily. I need that by my side. Is there anything else in this contract I should know about?" Victor hesitated for an almost imperceptible moment. The final clause stipulates that the marriage must be consummated once on the wedding night. Without that, the contract is void. Isabella snapped the folder shut, standing up. "This is prostitution with extra steps," she said. Indignation overcoming her fear. "No," Victor replied, also standing. "It's a business transaction. Clean, clear, with mutual benefits. And it's only once. After that, you will have your own room, your own life within the house." "Why does that clause exist?" "Because I need the marriage to be legal in every sense, incontestable, with no loopholes for future annulments." Isabella walked to the window, trying to order her thoughts. The city spread out below, indifferent to the turmoil consuming her. $5 million. Financial freedom. The chance to study, to help her mother, to have a future different from the one she seemed destined for. "And if I say no?" "Then we say goodbye now and our lives go on as if we had never met," Victor answered simply. The silence filled the room again, denser than before. The ticking of the wall clock seemed to mark the frantic beats of Isabella's heart. "I need time to think," she said finally. "You have 24 hours, Victor replied. "The contract and my offer expire tomorrow at 10 a.m. When Isabella left the building, she felt as if she had lived years in that single hour. The weight of the folder with the contract in her bag seemed disproportionately heavy. On the sidewalk, under the now clear New York sky, she took a deep breath, trying to find the ground beneath her feet. The rest of the day passed in a confused blur. She returned to her apartment, reread the contract several times, each word seeming more surreal than the last. She tried to call her mother, but Marilyn was in one of her confused states, rambling about medication and abandonment. No advice would come from there. At night, sitting on the small balcony of her apartment, Isabella watched the city lights. Somewhere out there, Victor Salvatore was waiting for her answer. A man who could change her life with the stroke of a pen. A man who, for some mysterious reason, had chosen her. The mark on her wrist, that small crescent moon she had always considered just a birth quirk, suddenly seemed like a symbol of something bigger, something she didn't yet understand. Why was it so important to Victor? What did it really mean? She fell asleep with these questions and dreamed of pianos playing by themselves in empty houses. The next morning, at 9:55 a.m., Isabella entered the private elevator at Salvatore Investments again. She wore the same simple dress, but something about her had changed. A determination, a certainty that hadn't been there the day before. Victor was waiting for her in the same spot, as if he hadn't moved all night. His eyes studied her face, searching for the answer before she even spoke. "I accept," Isabella said, placing the folder on the desk. "On one condition." Victor raised his eyebrows slightly, the only sign of surprise he allowed himself to show. "And what would that be?" "I want to know why the mark is important." "The real reason." A silence stretched between them, taut as a wire about to snap. "My mother believed it was a sign," Victor said finally, "of a special lineage, of an intertwined destiny. And Helen, my late wife, also had that mark. When I saw it on your wrist," he stopped, recomposed himself. "It's superstitious and irrational, I know. But I can't ignore it." Isabella felt a shiver run down her spine. Something in the explanation seemed incomplete, like a half-told story. But it would be enough for now. "We have a deal then," she said, extending her hand. Victor shook her hand, and the touch seemed to seal more than a contract. It sealed a destiny. "The wedding will be at City Hall in 3 days," he informed her. "Discreet, no guests. Afterward, you will move into my house. My driver will pick up your belongings." "So soon?" "Business, Isabella. There's no reason to delay." 3 days later, Isabella Mendez became Isabella Salvatore in a civil ceremony that lasted less than 20 minutes. She wore a simple white dress, bought in a hurry from a department store. Victor wore a dark suit almost identical to the one he wore the day they met. There were no kisses, no rice thrown in the wind, no photographers. Just signatures in a book, gold rings slipped onto stiff fingers, and the justice of the peace's pronouncement, "I now pronounce you husband and wife." As they left City Hall, a light rain was falling on New York, enveloping the city in a grey mist. The driver was waiting with the door of the Maybach open. Isabella got in, feeling the cool leather against her legs, the smell of new luxury that permeated the vehicle's interior. Victor got in shortly after, sitting at a calculated distance from her. "Home, Arthur," he instructed the driver. The car glided through the chaotic traffic as if it existed in its own dimension, immune to congestion and haste. In silence, they crossed bridges, avenues, and finally entered the Upper East Side. The gate to the Salvatore mansion opened automatically. The grounds were extensive, meticulously cared for, with centuries-old trees and a central fountain where water danced in hypnotic patterns. The house itself was an imposing structure, with traces of modernized colonial architecture, wide verandas, tall windows, and elegance that spoke of tradition and power. "Welcome to your new home," Victor said as the car stopped. The main door was opened by a middle-aged woman dressed in a discreet uniform. "This is Regina, the housekeeper," Victor introduced. "She will show you the premises and answer any questions you may have about the house." "Welcome, Mrs. Salvatore," Regina said with a subtle curtsy. The strangeness of being called by that name, the name of a man she barely knew, of a family she knew nothing about, hit Isabella with force. What was she doing? What kind of madness had she gotten herself into? But it was too late to turn back. The contract was signed, the ceremony completed, and $500,000 was already deposited in a bank account with her name on it. More money than she had ever seen. "I'll leave you with Regina," Victor said, checking his watch. "I have an unavoidable meeting. I'll be back for dinner at 8. And just like that, without another word, he was gone, leaving her at the entrance of the mansion that was now theoretically her home. Regina proved to be an efficient guide. The house was even larger inside, with rooms that seemed to unfold into one another. A library with 2 floors of books, a music room where a Steinway grand piano rested like a sleeping beast, and a conservatory where exotic plants created a small tropical paradise within the mansion. "This will be your room, Madam," Regina said, opening a door on the 2nd floor. The room was spacious, decorated in soft shades of blue and grey. A king-size bed dominated the center, with Egyptian linen sheets that looked like solidified clouds. A walk-in closet already stocked with new clothes, all in her size, she noted with astonishment. A fine wooden desk under the window overlooking the garden. A marble bathroom with a tub that looked more like a small swimming pool. "Your belongings have already been brought and organized," Regina informed her. "Mr. Salvatore asked us to provide a new wardrobe compatible with your new position. I hope it is to your liking." Isabella just nodded, unable to express the whirlwind of emotions consuming her. All of this was so unreal, so far from the life she knew that it felt like she was living someone else's dream. "There is something else you need to know," Regina said, her tone shifting subtly. "About the room at the end of the hall." Isabella turned, intrigued by the change in the housekeeper's voice. "That room remains locked," Regina explained. "It was Mrs. Helen's studio. No one goes in there ever, not even to clean." "I understand," Isabella replied, though she didn't really understand. "A locked room, preserved like a shrine to a dead woman." The Gothic cliché was almost comical, if it weren't so unsettling. "One more thing," Regina added, already at the door. "Mr. Victor, he has nightmares. Sometimes he screams in his sleep. Don't be alarmed if you hear it, and do not mention it to him ever." With those enigmatic words, the housekeeper left, leaving Isabella alone with her thoughts and the growing feeling that she had stepped into a story far more complex and dark than she had imagined. At 8 o'clock sharp, a light knock on the door announced that dinner was served. Isabella had spent the afternoon exploring the room, examining the new clothes, all from expensive brands she could never afford, and trying to calm the anxiety that grew with each passing hour. In the closet, she found a simple but elegant black dress. She put it on, feeling the fine fabric slide over her skin. In the mirror, she saw a stranger, a version of herself, but in someone else's clothes, in a setting that seemed borrowed from a movie. The dining room was a formal space, with a table long enough to seat 20 people. Only 2 places were set, one at the head and the other to its right. Victor was already seated, wearing a crisp white shirt, no tie, with the sleeves rolled up to his forearms, revealing strong wrists. "Isabella," he said, rising briefly as she entered. "I hope you found everything to your liking." "The house is impressive," she replied, sitting in the place indicated by a silent butler. Dinner was served, a succession of refined dishes that Isabella barely recognized. She ate little, her stomach tight with nervousness. They talked about pleasantries, the weather, her adjustment to the house, the plans for her education. Victor suggested she could start her psychology course the following semester, and that he had already spoken with the university's dean to secure a spot, despite the application period having passed. "You've already planned everything, haven't you?" she asked, a slight edge of defiance in her voice. "Planning is what got me here," he replied, taking a sip of red wine. "Leaving things to chance is inviting chaos." When dessert was served, an elaborate construction of chocolate and red berries, Victor finally broached the subject that hung between them like a shadow. "About tonight," he began, his voice as controlled as ever. "The contract stipulates the consummation of the marriage. If you prefer, we can postpone it for a few days, until you are more comfortable with the situation." Isabella felt her face flush. Despite all the preparations, all the rationality with which she had approached the situation, the reality of what was about to happen hit her with renewed force. "No," she said, her voice firmer than she expected. "I'd rather fulfill the terms now and move on." Something akin to admiration shone in his eyes for an instant. "As you wish." After dinner, they ascended the main staircase together. The silence between them was dense, heavy with expectation and apprehension. In the second-floor hallway, Victor stopped before the door to the master bedroom, not the room that had been shown to Isabella earlier. "My room," he said, opening the door. The room was large, dominated by a huge bed with dark canopies. The decor was masculine, in shades of brown and grey, with few adornments other than some books and an abstract painting on the wall opposite the bed. No photos, no visible personal objects. "I'm going to take a shower," he said, heading to a door that presumably led to the bathroom. "Make yourself comfortable. There's a robe in the closet if you prefer." When the bathroom door closed, Isabella took a deep breath, trying to order her thoughts. She was about to give her virginity to a stranger as part of a business contract. The absurdity of the situation would have made her laugh if she weren't so terrified. She walked to the window, watching the gardens illuminated by strategically placed lights. Outside, the New York night pulsed, indifferent to the drama unfolding in that room. "I don't have to do this," she thought. She could leave right now, back out of the deal, return the money she had already received, go back to her tiny apartment, to the daily struggle, to uncertainty. But something kept her there. It wasn't just the money, though that was a powerful motivator. It was a deeper curiosity about the man behind the mask of coldness, about the secrets the house hid, about the strange connection she had felt since their first glance. When Victor came out of the bathroom, wearing only black silk pajama pants, Isabella was still standing by the window. His bare torso revealed a well-maintained body, with defined but not exaggerated muscles. A few old scars marked his abdomen and chest, vestiges of some past accident, perhaps. "If you've changed your mind," he said, approaching, "we can postpone." "I haven't," she replied, turning to face him, "but I would like to better understand why this clause exists. The real reason." Victor hesitated, the first sign of uncertainty he had shown since she met him. "Because I need to know if you are truly committed to this agreement, if you are willing to go all the way. It's a test, then." "In a way?" Isabella took a step forward, closing the distance between them. "And what if I fail?" "I don't believe you will fail, Isabella," he replied, his voice softer. "There is a strength in you that few possess." She slowly raised her hand, touching his face. The stubble was rough against her fingers. Victor closed his eyes briefly at the touch, as if it were something long forgotten. "You're doing this out of obligation," he said, opening his eyes. "By contract." "Yes," she admitted. "I don't want that. Not like this." Victor stepped back, creating a physical distance that mirrored the emotional chasm between them. "The contract will be honored," he said, his voice regaining its professional tone. "Consider the clause fulfilled. You may return to your room if you prefer." Isabella stood motionless, confused by the sudden change. "I don't understand." "There's nothing to understand," he replied, walking to a small table where a bottle of whiskey rested. He poured himself a generous measure. "You did your part by being willing. That's enough. Is this kindness?" A bitter smile curved his lips. "Kindness is not a quality they usually associate with me." Isabella felt a pang of disappointment she couldn't explain. Why did she feel rejected? Wasn't this exactly what she wanted? To be spared the forced consummation of the marriage? "Good night, Victor," she said finally, walking to the door. "Isabella," he called as she was about to leave, "starting tomorrow, we will begin to build the narrative of our marriage for the outside world. There will be a dinner with some close associates at the end of the week. Be prepared." She nodded without turning and stepped out into the hallway. As she walked to her own room, she felt a chill as she passed the locked door at the end of the hall, the studio of the late Helen. For a moment, she thought she heard soft piano notes coming from within, but she convinced herself it was just the wind in the windows or her overactive imagination. In her room, Isabella let herself fall onto the gigantic bed, still dressed. The ceiling above her seemed as distant as the sky. She was married but alone, rich but dependent, free from the immediate consummation, but bound by a contract that turned her into a kind of full-time actress. What had she become? The following weeks passed in a blur of adjustments and discoveries. Isabella quickly learned the unwritten rules of New York's high society. A style consultant, hired by Victor, taught her how to dress, how to move, how to behave like the wife of one of the country's most powerful men. A private tutor refined her diction, her vocabulary, her table manners. The external transformation happened before her eyes every time she looked in the mirror. The Isabella who sold truffles from door to door seemed like a distant memory, almost from another life. Now she dressed in pieces by renowned designers, wore discreet but valuable jewelry, and her once rebellious hair was always impeccable. The first social event as Mrs. Salvatore was a dinner at the mansion itself, with about 20 guests, all members of the company's board or close business partners. Isabella surprised herself with her ability to adapt, smiling at the right moments, making brief but pertinent comments, playing the role of the devoted and intelligent wife to perfection. Victor, watching her from the other side of the table, seemed almost proud. That night, as they said goodbye in the hallway between their rooms, he praised her for the first time. "You were exceptional," he said simply. The comment, brief as it was, warmed something inside her that she hadn't known was cold. As the days passed, Isabella began to notice patterns in Victor's behavior. He invariably woke up at 5 a.m., ran for an hour in the mansion's gardens, and then locked himself in the library until it was time to leave for the office. He rarely returned before 8 p.m., ate dinner in silence while reading reports, and retired to his room soon after. On Sundays, however, his routine changed. He would get up later, have breakfast on the veranda, and spend hours in the library reading literature instead of financial documents. On some afternoons, he would disappear for hours without saying where he was going. Regina, when asked, only commented that it was a personal engagement. Her curiosity about this enigmatic man who was now her husband grew each day. At the dinners they shared, Isabella began to ask small questions, attempts to penetrate the armor he wore so naturally. "Why finance?" she asked one night. "How did you choose this path?" Victor looked at her with surprise, as if not expecting genuine interest on her part. "My father was a banker," he replied after a pause. "Third generation of the family in the business. I grew up watching the numbers, learning to read the market patterns before I even understood what they meant." "Do you like what you do?" The question seemed to disconcert him. "I like the control it gives me. The predictability of numbers in contrast to the unpredictability of people." "You prefer numbers to people, then?" A rare, fleeting smile crossed his lips. "Numbers don't disappoint. They don't lie. They don't die." The last word hung between them, laden with unspoken meanings. On another night, it was he who initiated the personal conversation. "Why psychology?" he asked, referring to the course she would soon begin. What attracts you to the human mind? Isabella hesitated, surprised by his interest. Maybe because I grew up trying to understand my mother. Why she was so unstable, so broken. I wanted to fix what was wrong, but I never knew how. Some people can't be fixed, Victor commented, his gaze distant. I disagree, she replied, with more firmness than she intended. Everyone can heal with the right support and the will to change. An optimistic view, he said, with something that sounded almost like envy. I hope you can maintain it. As time went on, Isabella began to feel less like a stranger in the mansion. The staff, Regina, the butler Charles, the chef Philip, the gardeners and housekeepers, treated her with genuine respect. She found a purpose in reorganizing the donations for the foundation Victor had created in Helen's name, directing resources to mental health treatments, a previously neglected area, and above all she had started to study. Her classes at the university were an oasis of normalcy in her now extraordinary life. There she was just another student, even if she arrived in a chauffeured car and had to ignore the curious glances and whispers. It was at the university that she met Louise, a final-year psychology student who became her first true friend since the move. Louise was direct, irreverent and completely indifferent to Isabella's status as Victor Salvatore's wife. So what's it like being married to the Iceman? Louise asked one day as they studied in the library. Iceman? That's what they call your husband in financial circles. The heartless man who froze the market when his wife died. Isabella felt a cold knot in her stomach. He's not like that. No? Louise questioned, raising an eyebrow. They say he destroyed 3 companies in the month after the funeral. Absorbed them without mercy. Fired hundreds. People deal with grief in different ways, Isabella defended, surprised by her impulse to protect Victor's reputation. Louise studied her with renewed interest. "Oh, you actually like him?" It wasn't a question, and Isabella had no answer. Did she like Victor? She admired his discipline, his intelligence, the rare glimpses of humanity he allowed to show. But like? How could she like someone she barely knew, who kept her at a safe distance, who treated her like a valuable piece in a larger game? That night, upon returning home, Isabella once again passed the locked door in the hallway, Helen's studio. She stopped, drawn by an inexplicable impulse. She pressed her ear to the old wood, and again she thought she heard soft piano notes. It wasn't her imagination this time, she was sure. "There's no one in there," a voice said from behind her, making her jump. It was Regina, watching her with an unreadable expression. "I heard music," Isabella insisted. "It's the wind in the windows," the housekeeper replied. "Or the old pipes. This house has its own sounds. Is the door always locked?" "Always," Regina confirmed. "Mr. Victor keeps the only key." Isabella nodded, not pressing the issue. But her curiosity only grew. What was in that room that needed to be kept so rigorously hidden? A few days later, while looking for a book in the library for a college paper, Isabella found an old photograph tucked between the pages. It showed a young woman of rare beauty, seated at a piano. She had dark hair, deep eyes, and an expression of serene melancholy. On her left wrist, visible as she played, was a small, crescent-shaped mark identical to her own, Helen. Turning the photo over, she found an inscription. "For V, music is the mathematics of feelings. Always yours, H." She was putting the photo back in the book when she heard footsteps. She turned to find Victor in the library doorway, watching her with an expression that mixed surprise with something close to anger. "What are you doing?" he asked, his voice controlled but with an underlying tension. "I'm sorry," Isabella said, showing him the photo. "I found it by accident while looking for a book." Victor crossed the room in long strides, taking the photograph from her hands with more force than necessary. "You shouldn't go through my personal things," he said, the usual coldness back in his voice. "I wasn't going through them." Isabella defended herself. "As I said, it was an accident. She was very beautiful." Victor looked at the photo for a long moment, his face softening almost imperceptibly. "Yes, she was," he agreed, his voice low, "beautiful and talented, and completely unprepared for the life we lived." "What happened to her?" Isabella dared to ask. "The truth, not the official version." Victor sat down heavily in one of the leather armchairs, still holding the photo as if it was something fragile and precious. "The official version is the truth. Helen took her own life, an overdose of antidepressants combined with alcohol. His voice was devoid of emotion, as if reciting facts from a financial case. What the press doesn't know is that she had tried before. 3 times. And that I found her on every occasion. "I'm so sorry," Isabella murmured, sitting in the opposite armchair. "The last time she left a letter, she said the music had left her head, that she only heard silence even when she played, and that she couldn't live in a world without sound." Victor closed his eyes briefly. "I was in London when it happened. A meeting that could have been postponed but wasn't. When I got back, it was too late." The weight of the confession hung between them, dense as fog. "Is that why the room is locked?" Isabella asked softly. "The studio?" "Yes, I can't bring myself to get rid of it, nor to go in there." Victor put the photo in his inner jacket pocket. "But you hear the music, don't you?" The question took Isabella by surprise. "You hear it too?" "No," he replied, standing up. "But Helen used to say that some people could hear the music, even when the piano wasn't being played. People with the mark." He gestured to her wrist. "She believed in things that can't be explained by logic or science. I don't." Victor walked to the door but stopped before leaving. "We're having dinner with my brother Raphael tomorrow. He's curious to meet you." The mention of Victor's brother, a figure hitherto absent from their conversations, sparked a new curiosity in Isabella. "Are you two close?" A humorless smile curved Victor's lips. "Not in the slightest." Dinner with Raphael Salvatore was an experience Isabella would not soon forget, different from Victor in almost every way. Raphael was extroverted, charming, with an easy smile that lit up his green eyes, the same eyes as his brother, but with a completely distinct expression. "I finally meet the mysterious bride who captured my brother's heart of ice," Raphael said, kissing Isabella's hand with studied gallantry. "All of New York is talking about the sudden marriage of the financial elite's most eligible bachelor." Victor watched the interaction with a sharp gaze, like a hawk studying a potential threat. "Raphael works at the company," Victor explained as the chef served the appetizer. "Public relations. He has a special talent for convincing people." "My brother means I'm the friendly face of Salvatore Investments," Raphael corrected with a laugh. "Someone has to smile in that company, and it certainly won't be him." The tension between the brothers was palpable, like static electricity before a storm. During dinner, Raphael directed most of his conversation to Isabella, asking about her life before the marriage, her studies, her plans for the future. His interest seemed genuine, his eyes attentive to every answer. "Psychology," he commented when she mentioned college. "Fascinating choice. Perhaps you can analyze why my brother is the way he is." "Isabella is not your therapist, Raphael," Victor intervened, his voice icy. "Of course not. She's his wife." Even more intriguing, Raphael raised his wineglass in a silent toast to her. After dinner, as Raphael was leaving, he held Isabella's hand for a moment longer than necessary. "You should visit the company sometime," he suggested. "See the empire your husband built. It would be my pleasure to show you around." "Isabella is busy with her studies," Victor answered before she could speak. "Of course," Raphael agreed, without taking his eyes off her. "But the invitation remains open." When his brother finally left, Victor seemed more tense than usual, with lines of worry marking his face. "Your brother seems interesting," Isabella commented as they climbed the stairs to the second floor. "Raphael is dangerous," Victor replied simply. "Never forget that." "Dangerous how?" Victor stopped, turning to face her. "He is charming, convincing, and completely unscrupulous. He believes he should be in charge of the company, not me." "Why?" "Because he's 3 minutes older." The revelation surprised Isabella. "You're twins?" "Fraternal twins, obviously. Our father left the controlling shares to me in his will." "Raphael never accepted that." "And why did your father choose you?" The question went unanswered. Victor just wished her good night and went to his room, leaving Isabella with more questions than answers. In the following weeks, Raphael became a constant presence in Isabella's life. He began calling her regularly, always with some pretext related to charity events or foundation initiatives. He sent flowers to the mansion with cards signed, "From your secret admirer who isn't so secret, R." Isabella knew she should keep her distance, that Raphael's attentions were at the very least inappropriate. But there was something captivating about his open personality, his seemingly genuine interest in her as a person, not as an accessory or a contract. One afternoon, as she was leaving college, she found Raphael waiting for her, leaning against his convertible Porsche. "Thought I'd offer you a ride," he said with his characteristic smile. "Your driver had an unforeseen issue. I called the mansion and Regina informed me." Isabella hesitated. It seemed too convenient. "Does Victor know you're here?" "My brother doesn't control my movements, Isabella," Raphael replied, opening the passenger door. "Just as he shouldn't control yours." Against her better judgment, she accepted the ride. Instead of heading straight for the mansion, Raphael suggested a detour through Central Park to enjoy the sunny afternoon. They walked together through the gardens, talking about everything and nothing. Raphael was an excellent listener, asking questions that showed real interest in her answers. "It must be suffocating," he commented at one point, "living in that mansion, with all the unwritten rules, all the ghosts." "It's not so bad," Isabella defended, though she knew there was truth in his words. "Victor was always like that, you know. Even as children, controlling, calculating, our father admired that in him. In me he saw only frivolity." "You and your father didn't get along?" Raphael laughed, but the sound was empty of humor. "He tolerated me. Victor was the son he wanted. I was just the accident that came along with him." There was a bitterness in his voice that touched Isabella. Behind the charming, carefree facade, she sensed a deep hurt, a wound that had never fully healed. "Your marriage," Raphael said abruptly, looking directly at her. "It isn't real, is it?" Isabella froze. "What are you talking about?" "I know my brother, Isabella. He doesn't fall in love. Not after Helen. This sudden marriage to a stranger with no prior connection to our social circle, it has the scent of one of Victor's strategic arrangements." "You're mistaken," she replied, trying to maintain her composure. "Our marriage is private but genuine." Raphael smiled as if she had confirmed his suspicions. "If you say so. But if you ever need a friend, a real friend, not a contract husband, you know where to find me." When Raphael finally took her home, Isabella felt shaken. How did he know? Or was he just guessing, casting a line to confirm his suspicions? Victor was waiting at the entrance of the mansion, his face a mask of cold fury. "My brother seems to be your personal driver now," he commented as she got out of the car. Raphael waved from the driver's seat, the provocative smile never leaving his face. "Just being a good brother-in-law, Victor. See you soon, Isabella." The Porsche sped off with a roar, leaving them at the mansion's entrance. "I don't trust him," Victor said as soon as they were inside. "And you shouldn't either." "He's your brother," Isabella replied, "and he's been kind to me." Raphael does nothing without a purpose. Every smile, every kindness, it's all calculated. "That sounds like someone I know," she retorted, surprising herself with her boldness. Victor's eyes darkened. "Be careful, Isabella. You're playing with fire." "I'm not the one hiding secrets," she accused. "This house is full of them. The locked room, Helen and her death, the mystery of the mark, and now a brother you clearly hate but keep close by." "I don't hate Raphael," Victor corrected, his voice lower. "He is my brother, despite everything. But I can't trust him, especially not with you." "Why? What could he do to me?" "So I could use you, like he uses everyone around him. Raphael wants the company. He wants what's mine. And now apparently he wants my wife too." The tension between them was almost tangible. For the first time since they met, Isabella saw real emotion in Victor's eyes, concern, anger, and something that looked almost like jealousy. "I'm not a trophy to be fought over between you two," she said firmly. "I'm a person with my own choices." "Yes, you are," Victor agreed, his voice softening unexpectedly. "And one of the few people who has ever dared to confront me this way." A strange silence fell between them, not the usual silence filled with distance, but something more intimate, as if an invisible barrier had begun to crumble. "Good night, Victor," she said finally, heading for the stairs. "Isabella," he called as she was already on her way up. "Just be careful, please." The request, almost a plea, followed her to her room where she lay awake for hours, mentally replaying the day's events and the implications of Victor's warning. In the following weeks, the tension in the Salvatore mansion became almost palpable. Victor started working even longer hours, often not returning for dinner. When he was home, he seemed distant, preoccupied with something he didn't share. Isabella, for her part, was torn between her increasingly absorbing studies and the strange dynamic developing between her and the Salvatore brothers. Raphael continued his subtle advances, messages, casual encounters near the university, invitations to lunches that she politely refused. One night, returning from the college library, Isabella found an envelope on her bed. Inside were legal documents, copies of her marriage contract with Victor, with sections highlighted in yellow. The main revelation: the contract had never been officially registered. A note accompanied the documents. "Not everything my brother says is true. We need to talk." The initial shock gave way to anger. Why would Victor lie about something so fundamental? If the contract wasn't registered, what did her marriage legally mean? And how had Raphael obtained this information? She went downstairs in search of Victor, determined to get answers. She found him in the library, as was common on the nights he stayed home. "The contract was never registered," she said without preamble, throwing the documents on the desk where he was working. "Our marriage is a complete sham." Victor looked at the papers, then at her, his expression as unreadable as ever. "Raphael," he said simply. "Of course. Is it true?" she insisted. "The contract has no legal validity." "Technically, no," Victor admitted. "But the marriage itself is legal. We signed at City Hall, remember? That is real. Why would you lie about the contract? Why all this elaboration?" Victor stood up slowly, as if he were very tired. "Because I was afraid you would back out if you knew there were no legal guarantees. That you could leave at any moment." The admission caught Isabella off guard. There was a vulnerability in his voice, a fragility he had never shown before. "Why would that matter? I'm just a piece in your game, a business arrangement." "It started that way," he agreed, moving closer to her. "But things have changed, Isabella. You've changed something in me, something I thought was long dead." Her heart raced, but anger still prevailed. "I don't trust you now. How can I know what's true and what's manipulation?" "Ask me anything," Victor offered. "I promise to answer honestly. The birthmark. What does it really mean to you?" Victor took a deep breath. "My mother believed it was a sign from the gods. Her word, not mine. She said people born with it are destined for great things, but also for great suffering. Helen had the mark. And when I saw it on your wrist at the charity gala, it was as if fate were giving me a second chance." "A second chance at what?" "To do things right this time. Not to make the same mistakes. To protect someone who carries the mark instead of failing her." Isabella tried to process the information, to separate truths from half-truths. "And Raphael, why is he so determined to separate us?" "Costa, because he sees you as a way to get to me. To destabilize what I've built." Victor hesitated. "And because he has always wanted what is mine." "I am not your property," Isabella reminded him, her voice firm. "No," Victor agreed, surprising her. "You are much more than that. Much more than I ever expected when I proposed this arrangement." There was an intensity in his gaze she had never seen before, a raw emotion that contradicted his reputation as a heartless man. For a moment, Isabella almost believed there were real feelings beneath the business facade. "I need to think," she said finally, gathering the documents. "This is all too much." Victor nodded. "I understand. But I only ask that you don't blindly trust Raphael. He is complicated, and he has his own motivations." That night, Isabella barely slept. Thoughts swirled in her mind like a vortex, the revelations about the contract, Victor's unexpected vulnerability, the insinuations about Raphael. Who was telling the truth? Who was manipulating her? And above all, why did her heart race when Victor looked at her that way? 2 days later, Raphael called, inviting her to lunch. Against her better judgment, Isabella accepted, determined to hear what he had to say and judge for herself. They met at a discreet restaurant in Greenwich Village, far from the circles frequented by the financial elite. Raphael was already waiting, elegant as always in a light suit that contrasted with his tanned skin. "You saw the documents," he said bluntly, as soon as they sat down. "I did." "How did you get them?" Raphael smiled. "I have my sources. The important thing is that you now know the truth. Victor has deceived you from the beginning. Why do you care?" Tashi asked directly. "Why this interest in my marriage?" "Because I've seen the same pattern before, Isabella. With Helen. Raphael leaned forward, his voice low and intense. She also started as an arrangement, a marriage of convenience that served Victor's purposes. And look how it ended. A chill ran down Isabella's spine. Are you suggesting Victor had something to do with her death? I'm suggesting that my brother destroys those close to him, not with his hands but with his coldness, his inability to truly love. Raphael touched her hand across the table. Helen was fragile. You are strong, but no one is strong enough to survive the void that exists where Victor's heart should be. The words were harsh, cruel even, but there was a conviction in Raphael's voice that made her hesitate. Why are you telling me this now? Because I care about you, he replied, his eyes fixed on hers. Because in just a few weeks, I've seen the extraordinary person you are, and because I can't stand by and watch history repeat itself. You barely know me, Isabella reminded him. I know enough. Lunch continued, with Raphael sharing stories of his childhood with Victor, painting a portrait of a calculating, cold brother, always their father's favorite, always ready to sacrifice relationships for ambition. As they parted, Raphael held her hand for a long moment. The contract isn't valid, Isabella. You can leave whenever you want. Start over. And the money? A sad smile curved Raphael's lips. It always comes back to that, doesn't it? Victor bought you like he buys everything. But there are things money can't buy. Happiness, freedom, true love. The words haunted her on the way back to the mansion. True love. Was that what she wanted? Was it possible in a relationship born from a contract, from a cold and calculated arrangement? When she arrived, she found Victor at home unexpectedly. He rarely came back from the office so early. You had lunch with Raphael, he said. It wasn't a question. How do you know? I have my sources, Victor replied, using the same words Raphael had used earlier. What did he tell you? Many things. About you, about Helen, about your past. Victor closed his eyes briefly as if gathering patience. And you believed him. I don't know who to believe now, Isabella admitted. You both have reasons to lie. You both have agendas I don't fully understand. The difference, Victor said slowly, is that I admit my mistakes. Raphael never does. A heavy silence fell between them. I need to know the truth about Helen, Isabella requested. All of it. Victor walked to the window, watching the gardens for a long moment before answering. Helen was like a summer storm, beautiful, intense, unpredictable. We met at a charity concert. She played the piano. I sponsored the event. His voice had a distant quality, as if speaking of another time, another life. I married her 6 months later, partly for love. Yes, I was capable of that then, partly for calculation. Helen came from a traditional family, with important connections. The marriage made sense professionally and personally. He turned to face Isabella. The problem started soon after. Helen suffered from deep depression. She had episodes of euphoria, followed by weeks in darkness. I tried to help in the only way I knew, by controlling, organizing, planning. The best doctors, the best treatments. But that wasn't what she needed, Isabella guessed. No, Victor agreed, his voice softer. She needed understanding, patience, someone who could enter the darkness with her. I didn't know how to do that. And Raphael, a look of pain crossed Victor's face. Raphael and Helen were close, very close. He understood her in ways I never could. In the end, they had an affair, Isabella completed, the pieces finally falling into place. Yes, I found out weeks before her death. I confronted her. I was cruel in my words. I said things I can't take back. And after that Victor nodded, the weight of guilt visible in every line of his face. I didn't kill her with my hands, Isabella. But my words may have been the final push she needed to do what she had been contemplating for so long. The confession hung between them, heavy as lead, and Raphael blames you. As he should, Victor admitted. I blame myself every day. Is that why the room remains locked, as a form of penance, as a reminder? Of the cost of coldness, of the price of control. Isabella moved closer to him, touching his arm lightly. And is that why you brought me to this house? To try to fix the past? Victor looked at her hand on his arm, then at her eyes. Initially, yes. You had the mark. You were strong where Helen was fragile. I thought it could be a new beginning. A clean arrangement without the complications of love. And now, a long moment passed before he answered, his eyes never leaving hers. Now I don't know what this is anymore. What we are, what I feel, and that terrifies me, Isabella. Losing control has always been my greatest fear. The vulnerability in his voice, the raw honesty, touched something deep inside her. For the first time since they met, Victor Salvatore seemed completely human, flawed, damaged, but real. I don't know if I can trust you, she said with equal honesty. Or Raphael. Or myself, to be honest. I understand, he replied, and I respect that. The contract may not be legally valid, but my promise remains. The money is yours regardless of what you decide to do. It's not about the money, she protested. Not anymore. Then what is it about? Isabella had no answer to that question. What had started as a business deal had transformed into something more complex, more confusing, more real. Feelings she shouldn't have, for a man who perhaps didn't deserve them, in a situation that defied all logic. I need time, she said finally. To think, to decide, Victor nodded. Take all the time you need. I'll be here. That night, alone in her room, Isabella made a decision. She needed to see for herself. She needed to enter the locked room. Logic dictated that Victor held the only key, but instinct and observation had taught Isabella that Regina, the housekeeper who saw and knew all, might have access to a copy. She waited until after midnight, when the house was silent. With light steps, she made her way to the housekeeper's room on the lower floor. The door was unlocked. Regina was sleeping soundly, likely aided by the sleeping pills Isabella knew she took regularly. On a small keychain on the nightstand, she found what she was looking for, an old ornate key different from all the others. She took it carefully and left as silently as she had entered. The second-floor hallway was shrouded in shadows. The locked door seemed even more forbidden at night, like an entrance to another world. With trembling hands, Isabella inserted the key into the lock. She turned it gently. The click of the lock releasing seemed absurdly loud in the nocturnal silence. She entered, closing the door behind her. The room was exactly as she had imagined, a spacious studio, dominated by a gleaming black grand piano. The walls were covered with framed sheet music and photographs. Helen alone, Helen with Victor, Helen at the piano. A desk in one corner held notebooks, apparently diaries or musical notations. The strangest part? The room looked freshly cleaned, without a speck of dust, the surfaces shining as if they had been polished that very day. Someone, probably Regina, kept the place immaculate, despite Victor's orders for no one to enter. Isabella approached the piano. On it, an incomplete score rested on the stand, as if Helen had just stood up and might return at any moment to finish the composition. The title, handwritten in an elegant script, Moon Reflections. She touched the keys lightly, producing soft notes that seemed to vibrate in the air in a strange, almost supernatural way. The feeling of invading a sanctuary was oppressive, but curiosity compelled her to continue. On the desk she found a stack of letters, some addressed to Victor, others to someone identified only as I.M., her initials. How was that possible? Helen had died years before Isabella met Victor. She opened one of the letters carefully. My dearest I.M., the dreams returned last night. The woman with the mark like mine, like Victor's mother's, she is coming and I don't know whether to fear or celebrate. Will she be the one to heal what I have broken, or just another to fall into the trap of the Salvatore men? The pact between our mothers was sealed so long ago before we were even born. The lineage of the moon, they called it. Women marked by fate, to love and to suffer, to create and to destroy. I can no longer bear the weight of this knowledge. The music is leaving my head, replaced by silence. And in the silence I hear only the truth I try to deny. Not all love is destined to survive, with regret and hope. Helen. Isabella let the letter fall, her hands trembling. What did it all mean? What was this pact? What connection was there between her and Helen, between their mothers, that transcended time and logic? She continued to examine the documents, each revelation more disturbing than the last. In a notebook, she found references to a man who had worked as a gardener at the Salvatore mansion decades earlier, a man named Peter Mendez, who had mysteriously disappeared after an affair with a housemaid, Peter Mendez, the same last name as hers, the father she had never known, who had abandoned her mother before she was even born. The possibility was as absurd as it was terrifying. What if she was the daughter of a Salvatore household employee? What if Victor was... No, it was impossible. The dates didn't add up. Victor couldn't be her father. He was too young for that. But could he be some kind of half-brother? A cousin? The idea made her stomach turn. She was so engrossed in her thoughts that she didn't hear the door open. She only realized she was no longer alone when Victor's voice cut through the silence. "So you found your way in here." Isabella spun around, her heart racing. Victor stood in the doorway, wearing only pajama pants, his bare chest revealing the old scars she had noticed before. His face showed no anger, only a deep sadness. "Victor, You don't need to explain," he interrupted. "Curiosity is natural. I haven't been able to come in here for years myself, but I don't have the courage to get rid of anything." He walked to the piano, touching it as if it were an old friend. "What did you discover?" he asked, gesturing to the scattered letters. "Things that don't make sense," she answered honestly. "References to a pact between mothers, to a lineage of the moon, and a man named Peter Mendez who worked here." Victor nodded slowly. "Mendez is a common surname. But yes, the coincidence intrigued me from the beginning. I had it investigated. Peter Mendez worked here for 3 years before I was born. He had an affair with one of the maids, a young woman named Marilyn." "My mother," Isabella whispered, the revelation hitting her like a physical blow. "Yes, she worked here when she became pregnant. My father fired her. Peter disappeared soon after. Some say he ran away, others that my father took care of the problem. I never knew the truth. That means..." "What does that mean, Victor?" He moved closer, stopping a few feet from her. "It doesn't mean we're related, if that's what you fear. Peter was not a Salvatore. He was just an employee. But still, the connection is strange." "Yes, as if our lives were intertwined long before we met." Victor looked at the mark on her wrist. "Helen believed in these things, destiny, cosmic patterns. I have always been more skeptical. And now..." A sad smile touched his lips. "Now I don't know what to believe anymore." Isabella looked at the letters, at the photographs of Helen, at the silent piano that somehow still seemed to produce music. "Why did you really choose me, Victor?" "The truth." He took a deep breath, as if gathering courage. "Because when I saw you at that event with your determination, your quiet strength, something inside me recognized something in you." The mark was just the confirmation of what I already felt, an inexplicable connection, as if I had been waiting for you without knowing I was waiting. The sincerity in his voice was undeniable. For the first time, Isabella completely believed what he was saying. "And the feelings you mentioned before, the ones you can't control." Victor took another step forward, closing the distance between them even more. "They are real, Isabella. Perhaps the first real feelings I've had in years." The air between them seemed charged with electricity. The attraction they had ignored, repressed, denied was now impossible to contain. "The contract, the arrangement," she began. "Forget the contract," Victor interrupted. "It doesn't matter anymore. What we have now goes beyond any agreement on paper." He reached out, touching her face gently, as if she were the most precious thing in the world. "If you want to leave, I will understand. If you want to stay, it won't be out of obligation or for money, but because you choose to stay." His touch sent shivers down Isabella's entire body. She closed her eyes, allowing herself to feel, just feel, without thinking about the complications, the doubts, the shadows of the past. When she opened them again, she saw something in Victor's eyes she had never expected to see: vulnerability, hope, and a desire that mirrored her own. "I don't know what to choose," she admitted. "Everything is so confusing." "Then don't choose now," he suggested, his voice low. "Let time decide." As if responding to unspoken words, Isabella stood on her toes and touched his lips with hers. A light, hesitant kiss that quickly deepened into something more profound, more urgent. Victor's hands found her waist, pulling her closer. She felt the solidity of his body, the warmth of his skin, the rapid beat of his heart that belied his reputation as an iceman. When they parted, both breathless, Isabella saw something new in his eyes. A sparkle, a life that wasn't there before, as if a part of him that had been dormant had finally awakened. Isabella. The sound of her name on his lips was almost a prayer. She kissed him again, with more urgency this time, allowing the desire she had suppressed for so long to finally break free. That night, in Victor's room, There were no contracts or arrangements, only two people discovering each other with an intensity that defied explanation. Isabella's surrender was not out of obligation, but by choice, a choice made with her heart, not her head. Afterward, lying in his arms, watching the night sky through the window, Isabella thought about the strange journey that had brought her here, from a truffle vendor to the wife of one of the country's most powerful men, from a cold contract to ardent feelings, from strangers to lovers. "What are you thinking about?" Victor asked, his fingers tracing soft patterns on her back. "About how unpredictable life is," she replied. "All the planning in the world could not have foreseen this." He chuckled softly, a surprisingly light sound coming from him. "Touché. And now?" she asked. "What happens next?" Victor kissed her forehead gently. "I don't know. For the first time in my adult life, I don't have a plan. And surprisingly, I don't feel lost." The moment of peace was shattered by the ringing of Victor's cell phone. He looked at the screen, frowning. "It's Raphael," he said, answering. Isabella watched his expression change, from relaxed to tense, then to something close to panic. "When?" he asked sharply. "I see. I'll be there in 20 minutes. He hung up, getting up quickly and starting to dress. "What happened?" "It's your mother, Isabella, Marilyn. She's in the hospital. Fair suicide attempt." The shock paralyzed her for a moment. "My mother? How does Raphael know?" "He has contacts at the hospital. Apparently she arrived an hour ago unconscious. Medication overdose." The similarity to Helen's death was not lost on either of them. "I have to go," Isabella said, getting up and looking for her clothes. "I'm going with you," Victor replied, already putting on his shirt. "My driver can take us immediately." In the car on the way to the hospital, Isabella struggled to process the information. Her mother, always unstable but never suicidal. Why now? And how did Raphael know before she did? "Something isn't right," she said to Victor. "My mother and I aren't close, but she would always call me in an emergency." "Unless she didn't have a choice," Victor agreed grimly. At the hospital, they were met by Raphael, who was waiting in the lobby. His face showed concern, but there was something calculated in his expression that made Isabella uneasy. "How is she?" she asked immediately. "Stable," Raphael replied. "They pumped her stomach in time. She's unconscious, but the doctors believe she'll recover." "How did you know about this?" Victor questioned, suspicion evident in his voice. Raphael shrugged. "I have contacts. I knew it was Isabella's mother because I know her maiden name. I thought you'd want to know." There was something in the explanation that didn't ring true, but Isabella was too worried about her mother to question it at that moment. "Can I see her?" "The doctors are with her now," Raphael answered. "They suggested waiting until morning." Victor placed a hand on Isabella's shoulder. "We'll stay, as long as it takes." The next few hours were a tense vigil in the waiting room. Victor remained by Isabella's side, a silent but comforting presence. Raphael stayed too, occasionally chatting with passing doctors and nurses, always smiling, always charming even in this difficult situation. In the morning, they were finally able to see Marilyn. She was pale, looking fragile against the white hospital sheets, tubes and monitors connected to her body. Isabella sat by the bed, gently holding her mother's hand. "Why would she do this?" she asked, more to herself than to the men accompanying her. "The doctors found a letter," Raphael said, removing an envelope from his inner jacket pocket. "Addressed to you." Isabella took the envelope with trembling hands. "Why do you have it?" "The doctor gave it to me as family," he replied, the lie flowing easily. She opened the envelope, carefully unfolding the paper. The handwriting was her mother's, but strangely firm for someone in an extreme emotional state. "Isabella, if you are reading this, I have failed in my attempt. Perhaps it is for the best. There are things you need to know, truths I have kept for a long time. Your father did not abandon us. He was forced to leave. The family we worked for, the Salvatores, found out about our affair. Old man Salvatore fired me and threatened Peter. I never saw him again. There is more, much more, about the mark that you and I carry, about the pact between women of past generations, about the curse that follows our lineage. Be careful of the Salvatore man, especially Raphael. He is not what he seems. If you can, forgive me for not being strong enough. With love, even if I was never able to show it properly, Your mother. Isabella read the letter several times, trying to comprehend the implications. She looked at Victor, then at Raphael. One of them, perhaps both, was hiding more than he had revealed. "I need to speak with my mother alone," she said firmly. "Both of you, please leave." Raphael seemed about to protest, but Victor cut him off. "Of course. We'll be outside if you need anything." When the two men left, Isabella leaned over her mother, speaking softly. "Mom, I know you can hear me. I need you to wake up. I need to know the truth." As if responding to her plea, Marilyn's eyes fluttered and slowly opened. She blinked several times, focusing on her daughter's face. "Isabella," she whispered, her voice hoarse. "I'm here, Mum." "The letter. Did you read it?" "Yes," Isabella confirmed. "But I need to know more." "What did you mean about Raphael?" About the pact, Marilyn glanced at the closed door, as if afraid someone might be listening. "I didn't try to kill myself," she whispered. He forced me to take the pills. Said he would kill you if I didn't cooperate." "Who, Mom? Who did this?" Marilyn's eyes filled with tears. "Raphael. He's the son of the man who separated your father from me, the old Salvatore." Her voice grew stronger, driven by urgency. "He wants revenge. Against Victor. Against all of us." "The mark, Isabella. The mark is what he's looking for." "Why? What does it mean?" But Marilyn was becoming agitated, the monitors starting to beep in alarm. "Be careful of him. Be careful." The door opened and a nurse rushed in, followed by the doctor. "I need you to leave now," the doctor ordered. "Your mother must not get agitated." Isabella was gently escorted out of the room, her mind spinning with the incomplete revelations. In the hallway, she found Victor alone. "Where's Raphael?" she asked immediately. "He left to make some calls," Victor replied, studying her face. "What happened?" Isabella looked around, making sure they were truly alone. "It was Raphael," she whispered. "He forced my mother to take the pills. He threatened to kill me if she didn't cooperate." Victor's expression darkened. "Are you sure?" "That's what my mother said." "And why would she lie?" "Because she's confused, medicated, mentally unstable," Victor replied, though without much conviction. "But it wouldn't be the first time Raphael has crossed unacceptable lines." "We need to call the police," Isabella insisted. "And say what?" "That a woman with a history of mental instability is accusing someone of forcing her to overdose." "Without proof?" Victor shook his head. "Raphael is powerful, Isabella. He has connections, allies. We need to be smarter than him." "What do you suggest, then?" "We go back to the mansion. We keep your mother under constant surveillance here at the hospital. I'll hire private security. And we find out what Raphael really wants." Isabella hesitated. "My mother mentioned the mark again. She said it's what Raphael is looking for." A flash of understanding crossed Victor's face. "Of course. Helen's letters. The pact between the mothers. Raphael was always obsessed with those stories, those superstitions. What exactly does this legend say?" Victor hesitated, as if weighing how much he should reveal. "According to the story my mother used to tell, the mark identifies women of a special lineage. Women with powers, for lack of a better word, the ability to influence destinies, to alter the course of events. The legend says that a woman with the mark, united with a man from the Salvatore family, could bring prosperity or ruin, depending on the purity of the union." "And you believe that?" "No," he replied firmly. "But Raphael always did, especially after Helen. He worshipped her, believed she was the woman of the prophecy. When she died, something broke inside him." Isabella tried to process the information, to separate reality from superstition, truth from manipulation. "Whatever Raphael is planning, we can't face him here," Victor concluded. "Let's go home. We need a plan." "Home," Isabella repeated, the words sounding strangely comforting now despite everything. In the car, on the way back to the mansion, Isabella made a decision. Regardless of the legends, the secrets, the manipulations, there was one truth she could no longer deny. Her feelings for Victor were real. What had begun as a contract had transformed into something deeper, more genuine. And now they faced a common enemy. What could Raphael really want? She asked Victor. "Power," he answered simply. "Control of the company, of the family fortune. He's always wanted that. But there's something more now, something personal. Revenge, perhaps, for Helen. Did he really love her? Victor hesitated. Yes, I believe he did. In his own way. And you? The question hung between them, heavy with meaning. I loved who I thought she was, Victor replied finally. But I never really knew her. Not like Raphael knew her. They arrived at the mansion in the mid-afternoon. The house seemed strangely quiet. Something's wrong, Victor said immediately, his businessman's intuition on high alert. They entered cautiously. In the main hall they found Regina, tied to a chair, gagged. Victor rushed to free her. What happened? He asked as he removed the gag. Raphael, the housekeeper answered, coughing. He came with 2 men. They were looking for something. In Helen's studio. The locked room, Isabella murmured. They ran to the 2nd floor. The studio door was open, the interior in chaos. Drawers overturned, sheet music scattered on the floor, the piano's lid open like a wound. What was he looking for? Isabella asked, observing the destruction. Victor knelt, picking up torn papers. The letters. The ones that mentioned the pact, the lineage of the moon. He looked around, assessing the damage. And it seems he found them. Isabella approached the piano. Something caught her eye, a fresh mark on the wood, as if someone had deliberately scratched the instrument. Looking closer, she saw it formed words. Flower Island, midnight, both of you come or she dies. Victor, she called, pointing to the message. He examined the engraved words, his face hardening. It's a trap, he said. Obviously, Isabella agreed. But if he's threatening my mother, it's not your mother he wants, Victor concluded. It's you, the woman with the mark. The realization of the danger was clear to both of them. Raphael, driven by superstition or madness, had crossed a line. Whatever he believed about the legend, he was willing to cause real harm to achieve his goals. We can't call the police, Isabella said, thinking aloud. They wouldn't believe this story of marks and legends. They'd think we're crazy. No, Victor agreed. We have to handle this ourselves. Then we're going to Flower Island, she decided. It's too dangerous. We have no choice. If Raphael is willing to hurt my mother, we don't know what else he's capable of. Victor saw the determination in her eyes and knew it was useless to argue. We won't go unprepared, he said finally. The next few hours were spent in preparation. Victor made calls, arranged for discreet security, who would be strategically positioned on the island, a small, private property in the middle of a lake upstate, accessible only by boat, which had belonged to the Salvatore family for generations. Isabella called the hospital, confirming that her mother was fine, still sedated but stable. Private guards hired by Victor ensured her safety. As night fell, they were ready. Victor wore dark, practical clothes, a far cry from the elegant suits he usually wore. Isabella had also opted for comfort and mobility, jeans, a t-shirt, a light jacket. You don't have to do this, Victor said as they were about to leave. I can go alone, confront Raphael. I'm a part of this now, she replied firmly, whatever this is. The drive to the private marina where a speedboat awaited them was made in silence, each lost in their own thoughts. What had begun as a cold contract, a marriage of convenience, had evolved into something neither of them could have foreseen, a partnership, an alliance against common threats and, most surprisingly, a deep emotional bond. On the speedboat, crossing the dark waters toward the small illuminated island in the distance, Victor took Isabella's hand. Regardless of what happens tonight, he said, his voice barely audible over the engine's roar, I want you to know that my feelings for you are real. What started as an arrangement has become something I never expected to find again. Isabella squeezed his hand. I know that now, and I feel the same. The island was approaching quickly, a piece of land covered in dense vegetation, with a small summer house in the center, lit by external lights. Raphael will be waiting, Victor said as the boat slowed, approaching the small pier. Yes, Isabella agreed, but he's not expecting us to be prepared. They disembarked cautiously. The stone path leading to the house was lit by torches, creating an almost ritualistic scene. The night was strangely silent, without the usual sounds of insects or nocturnal birds. The house door was ajar. Victor gestured for Isabella to stay behind him as they entered. The interior was decorated as if for a ceremony. Lit candles in old candelabras, white flowers scattered on the floor, and in the center of the main room, A piano. The same Steinway model from Helen's studio, though clearly not the same instrument. Raphael was waiting for them, sitting casually in an armchair like a host welcoming guests to dinner, not a confrontation. He was dressed in white from head to toe, a dramatic contrast to the dark decor around him. "Welcome," he said, rising with a smile that didn't reach his eyes. The couple of the hour. The Iceman and the woman marked by the moon. "Where is my mother?" Isabella demanded immediately. Raphael raised his eyebrows. "Your mother? In the hospital, I imagine, recovering from the suicide attempt that never happened. You forced her to take the pills," she accused. "She told me everything." "Marilyn always had a vivid imagination," Raphael replied, walking to a side table where a bottle of wine rested. "I'd offer you a drink, but I suspect you'd refuse." "Enough with the games, Raphael," Victor intervened, his voice hard. "What do you want?" Raphael poured himself a glass of wine, sipping it slowly before answering. "Justice," he said finally. "Balance, closure, call it what you will." "For Helen?" Isabella asked. A sad smile touched Raphael's lips. "In part. Helen was special, unique. She understood things that neither I nor my brother will ever fully comprehend. And Victor destroyed her." "It wasn't like that," Victor protested, but without much conviction. "No?" Raphael shot back. "You turned her into an accessory, a trophy, a piece in your power game. And when she sought comfort elsewhere, in me, you punished her with words that pushed her over the edge." The pain in his voice was real. "Rojo, and now you're doing the same with Isabella," he continued. "Another contract, another woman with the mark, another cycle of the same tragedy." "You're mistaken," Isabella said, stepping forward. "What Victor and I have now goes beyond any contract." Raphael laughed, a humorless sound. "Love, is that what you think this is?" "He doesn't know how to love, Isabella. He only knows how to possess. And you do," she challenged. "You who manipulates, who lies, who forces vulnerable women to overdose to create drama. Is that love?" The question seemed to hit him like a physical blow. For a moment, his facade of control wavered. "I did what was necessary," he finally replied. "To bring you here, to complete the cycle." "What cycle?" Victor asked. "What are you talking about?" Raphael walked to the piano, caressing the keys gently. "The legend, brother. The prophecy. The woman with the mark, united with the Salvatore man on the island where it all began." He looked at Isabella. "Your mother worked here, you know, in this house. This is where she and your father first met. And this is where our father separated them. What does that have to do with Helen? With any of us now?" Isabella questioned. "Everything," Raphael answered. "Helen discovered the truth in our mother's diaries. The pact, the promise, the curse that has haunted our family for generations." "What curse?" Victor asked, impatience growing in his voice. "The curse of choice," Raphael explained. "In each generation, a woman with the mark must choose between the Salvatore brothers. One will bring prosperity, the other destruction. Our mother chose our father. And look what happened. An empire built on emotional ruins." The madness in Raphael's voice was unmistakable now. His obsession with the legend had consumed his sanity. "Helen didn't choose," he continued, "or she chose too late. She was torn between us and the result was tragedy." "And now you want me to choose," Isabella concluded, finally understanding. "Between you and Victor." "Yes," Raphael confirmed, his eyes shining with an almost religious fervor. "The final choice. The one that will determine the fate of the Salvatores forever." Isabella looked at Victor, then at Raphael. Two brothers so different, yet marked by the same past, the same losses, the same inability to process pain in a healthy way. "And what if I don't believe in your legend?" she asked. "What if I refuse to choose?" Raphael smiled, pulling something from his pocket, a small remote control. "Then we all lose," he answered simply, pressing a button. The sound of locking doors echoed through the house. At the same time, a strange odor began to spread. Gas. "What have you done?" Victor demanded, advancing toward his brother. "I've created the conditions for the final choice," Raphael replied, backing away. "Natural gas slowly filling the house. In 10 minutes, the concentration will be lethal. But there is one way out." He held up a key. "This opens a passage in the cellar. Only one person can pass at a time, and the door seals automatically after the first one goes through. So, Isabella, who do you choose to save?" The contract husband or the seductive brother-in-law? The monstrosity of the plan hit Isabella with full force. Raphael had gone completely insane, turning a superstition into a deadly game. "This is madness," she said. "For you're insane," perhaps, Raphael conceded. "Or perhaps I'm the only sane one among us, the only one who understands the weight of tradition, of lineage, of the mark." The gas was getting thicker. Isabella felt her throat begin to burn, her eyes watering. "Victor," she called, reaching for his hand. He came to her, holding it tightly. "We're not doing this," he said, staring at his brother. "We will not participate in your sick game." "You have no choice," Raphael replied, looking strangely immune to the effects of the gas, "unless you want to die together romantically, like Romeo and Juliet." Isabella then realized that Raphael was wearing an almost invisible mask, protection from the gas he had released. The situation was even worse than she had imagined. He had no intention of risking his own life in this game. "The security," she whispered to Victor. "Where are they?" "I don't know," he answered just as quietly. "They should have stormed in at the first sign of trouble." Raphael laughed as if he had overheard them. "Your men were neutralized before they even reached the island. I have my own resources, brother. I'm not the fool you always thought I was." Time was running out. The gas was becoming more concentrated by the minute. Isabella felt her consciousness begin to fade, her vision blurring. It was then that she noticed it, the piano. The sheet music on it, Helen's unfinished composition, Moon Reflections, now complete. With an instinct she couldn't explain, she staggered to the instrument. The keys seemed to glow in the candlelight, calling to her. "What are you doing?" Raphael asked, confusion in his voice. Isabella didn't answer. She sat on the bench, placed her fingers on the keys, the same fingers that once shaped truffles to survive, and began to play. The melody was strange, dissonant in parts, unexpectedly harmonious in others, a song that spoke of loss, of hope, of impossible choices. A song Helen had started and never finished, a song that was waiting for someone with the mark to complete it. As she played, something extraordinary happened. The sound seemed to dissipate the gas, creating a pocket of clean air around the piano. Victor, noticing, moved closer, breathing deeply. Raphael watched, incredulous. "Impossible," he murmured. "You don't even know how to play the piano." It was true. Isabella had never played before. But her fingers moved as if they knew the keys intimately, as if the music had been inside her all along, waiting to be released. The melody grew, intensified, filling the house with its power. The walls seemed to vibrate in response. And then the unexpected. A crack appeared in the floor, growing rapidly, opening like a wound between Raphael and the couple. "No!" Raphael screamed, backing away. "This isn't supposed to happen like this." The fissure continued to widen, following the rhythm of the music. Raphael was now trapped against the wall, the passage to the cellar, his planned escape route, on the other side of the opening in the floor. "Isabella," Victor called, panic evident in his voice. "We have to get out of here. The structure is collapsing." But she couldn't stop. The music possessed her completely. Each note seemed to connect her more deeply to something ancient, powerful, beyond rational understanding. The mark on her wrist was glowing with its own light now, visible even through the sleeve of her jacket. Raphael, seeing his plan literally crumbling, did the only thing he could. He tried to jump over the chasm to reach the exit, but he miscalculated. The opening was wider than it looked, and he fell, clinging to the edge for a moment before his fingers slipped. "Victor!" he screamed, fear finally breaking his mask of control. "Brother, help me!" Victor hesitated for only a second before moving, reaching out his hand to Raphael. But it was too late. With a scream that would echo in both their nightmares for years, Raphael fell into the darkness below. At the same instant, the music reached its final climax. The last note resonated through the house, and then silence. The fissure stopped growing. The gas had completely dissipated. Isabella let her hands fall to her sides, exhausted. She looked at Victor, who was pale in shock from what he had just witnessed. "We need to get out of here," he said finally, moving to help her up. The structure could give way at any moment. Together they staggered out of the house, leaning on each other. They had barely reached the garden when they heard the roar of the structure collapsing behind them. They turned to see the house partially sink into the ground, as if it had been built over a hidden cavern, that had finally caved in. At the pier, they found the speedboat intact. The security guards hired by Victor were there, tied and gagged, but alive. They freed them quickly. What happened in there? Victor asked as they sailed back to the mainland, leaving behind the island partially swallowed by the earth. Isabella looked at the mark on her wrist, now normal again, just a small crescent-shaped blemish. I don't know, she answered honestly. I don't know if it was the music or the old house on unstable foundations or, she hesitated, or if there really is something beyond our understanding. Something linked to the mark, the lineage, the pact. Victor held her hand, bringing the marked wrist to his lips and kissing it gently. Perhaps some questions don't have answers, he said, or perhaps the answers don't matter as much as what we choose to do now. And what do we choose? A soft smile, a rare thing on his usually serious face, lit up Victor's features. To live, without contracts, without arrangements, without the weight of the past. Just live one day at a time. The speedboat cut through the dark waters, taking them back to the city that glittered in the distance like a sea of earthly stars. Isabella rested her head on Victor's shoulder, feeling for the first time in a long time the peace of someone who had finally found her place in the world. In the months that followed, life transformed completely. The tragedy on Flower Island was officially recorded as an accident, a structural failure in the old summer house, causing a fissure in the ground that swallowed part of the building and, with it, Rafael Salvatore. No one questioned the story, as the island had a history of geological instability. Marilyn recovered slowly in the hospital. When she was discharged, Isabella insisted she move to New York. She bought her a small apartment near the Salvatore mansion, where they could gradually rebuild the relationship frayed by years of emotional distance. The locked room in the mansion, Helen's studio, was finally opened to the light of day. The sheet music was organized, the letters filed, the memories honored without being imprisoned. The foundation in Helen's name expanded, now also focusing on mental health and supporting talented musicians from underprivileged communities. Isabella continued her psychology studies, more determined than ever to understand the mysteries of the human mind, the behavioral patterns that drive people like Raphael to destructive extremes. Victor, for his part, proved to be different from the man everyone thought they knew. The mask of coldness he had worn for so many years began to melt under the warmth of the genuine love growing between them. He dedicated himself to transforming the company, prioritizing ethical investments and social causes, using his power to build rather than control. The marriage contract, that document that had never been registered, was burned in a small, private ceremony in the mansion's garden. In its place, real vows were exchanged, promises born not of obligation or convenience but of conscious choice and true love. And as for the mark, the legend, the supposed pact between generations, it remained a mystery. Sometimes on quiet nights, Isabella still heard distant echoes of music coming from impossible places. Victor occasionally woke from dreams, where his brother called to him from the depths. Marilyn, in moments of clarity, spoke of old promises made under full moons, of destinies intertwined through time. But these were just shadows of the past, echoes of stories they might never fully understand. The present, their present, built with daily choices, with forgiveness, with love, was more real, more tangible, more important. One autumn afternoon, as they walked hand in hand through the mansion gardens, Isabella stopped suddenly. Turning to face Victor, "Do you have any regrets?" she asked. "About everything that happened? The contract that brought us here?" Victor considered the question for a moment, his eyes reflecting the New York sky above them. "I regret many things in my life," he answered honestly. "The mistakes with Helen, the distance I kept from Raphael for so many years, the coldness I cultivated as a shield." He touched her face gently. "But the contract? Never. It was the crooked beginning of something too precious to be measured." Isabella smiled, covering his hand with hers. Her fingers, once rough from working with sweets, were now soft again but strong, just as she herself had become. "You know what's funny?" she said. "We started with a deal on paper, a loveless marriage, a cold, calculated arrangement." She brought his hand to her lips, kissing it. "And we ended up with the opposite. No paper, no contract, just this. Just us." Victor pulled her closer, holding her as if she were the most precious thing in the world. And to him she was. The woman who had melted the ice, who had shown him that even after the greatest of losses, it was possible to find the way back to the light. Just us, he repeated, sealing the promise with a kiss. Above them, the New York sky began to be painted with the colors of twilight. As the city pulsed around them, indifferent to the small miracle that had occurred